And good afternoon. My name is Jason Coleman, and I'll be the moderator for this session titled Proactively Enhancing Patron Technology Literacy. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link will be posted in chat momentarily. If you experience any issues related to conduct, please contact us via email, and I will also put that email in chat. Please be sure your microphone is muted. During the Q&A, please wait until you are invited to unmute before asking your question or making your comment. You may also use chat for questions. There's also a Q&A feature too that you can post questions. The session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. It is my pleasure to introduce Reed Hepler. Reed obtained a bachelor's degree in history from the Utah State University and a master's degree in library and information science from Indiana University. Currently, he is enrolled in the master's program in instructional design and technology at Idaho State University. He has used his experiences in instructional technology, digital curation, copyright, records management, public communication, and database research to develop best practice guidelines for generative AI use. He applies these guidelines and work for the College of Southern Idaho and in his private company, Hepler Consulting. Reed promotes ethical, equitable, and open technology, as well as information access in his corporate and educational work. He also advises on data privacy and confidentiality measures that should be at the forefront of generative AI interactions. Please join me in welcoming Reed.
Thank you very much, Jason, for your introduction. Just a disclaimer, some of you noted at the very beginning that when you came in that this presentation was made with artificial intelligence, and I do have a disclaimer in the corner. I do know what tools I use to create to create this presentation, but I have diffused this presentation with others and combined it and altered it and all sorts of things. So the actual ratio of artificial intelligence to my personally made content is much smaller. I do have much more human content than artificial intelligence, but it is still in there. So I do still have that disclaimer. Yes, this is proactively enhancing patron technology literacy. Just at the beginning, we will have sections and at times for discussion built into the presentation. And so I do have the question and the answer thing open and the chat. So if you want to pose questions in the middle, then when we have discussion times, as I'm talking, then when we have discussion times, I'll answer them. And Jason obviously is looking at that as well. So first, in fact, if I'm sharing my screen, you probably can see those. So we don't want to model your views. So here are the objectives, because I am an instructional designer, so we have to have good objectives. We're going to be able to define generative AI and its capabilities, analyze the potential impact of generative AI on patron technology literacy, evaluate ethical considerations involved in guiding patrons in the use of AI, examine the importance of libraries in enhancing technological literacy, explain the spectrum of views about generative AI in library science, apply strategies for enhancing patron technology literacy, evaluate best practices for teaching ethical use of generative AI, and create, an outline for a patron workshop using generative AI. So before we go on, a few questions that I would like to have us consider. First of all, how does generative AI impact patron technology literacy? Second, what is your perspective on patron uses of generative AI? What frustrates you the most about general patron use of AI? Because let's be honest, we do have some frustrations, especially for academic librarians. What strategies do you use when teaching technology literacy to patrons? I mean, what strategies do you use when teaching email, or when teaching Google searching, or when teaching about database research? Because these are similar strategies to those you will use with generative AI tools. It's just applying the same principles you have previously to new technologies. Obviously, the iterations will be different, but the principles are essentially the same. So we have a lot of generative AI tools. There are generative AI tools for text, image, text-to-speech materials, speech-to-text, video. There are even empathic AI. Hume.ai is working on text, speech, and video analysis. There are so many different types of tools, and I'm going to discuss best principles and best practices for a tool or format agnostic interaction format. In other words, I have an AI literacy framework or a way to interact with these tools that it's not based on, based on certain proprietary tools. I'm not going to only talk about ChatGPT or only talk about ideogram or only talk about Claude. These are principles that we can use with all these different types of tools, and you can apply them in different ways and encourage your patrons to as well. So first of all, what exactly is AI? Well, AI, a collection of analytics tools for processing and acting on data sets of various types, formats, media, and origins. They can be used for data analysis, data visualization, report creation, information dissemination, and public-facing products. So ChatGPT, just as an example, and ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity, a lot of these other large language models or transformers, as they're called, are built the same way. It is a language and communications model. It uses multiple data types, and it was exposed to a massive number of texts. It models syntax and semantics upon hundreds of example interchanges that it has had and that it has seen, and it also incorporates data from its interactions with users. So for GPT-3 and GPT 3.5, the data set is a little over 600 gigabytes. And this is primarily open content: Wikipedia, books corpuses, web text, 2016 to 2019 Common Crawl. And there are many people who say, it was trained using the entire internet. Well, the entire internet is estimated to be 64 zettabytes. That's 64 trillion gigabytes. And so obviously that is not what ChatGPT was trained upon. It was actually trained on 1/100 billionth of the internet. And so it's important to understand that while most of these are open resources, there are copyrighted resources that were used, and ChatGPT argues, and the ALA and the ARL agree that it is that those are fair uses of those copyrighted materials. But most of the materials, and I would say probably all of 3.5 data sets, or at least 3's, was with open accessed materials. There are many limitations and opportunities for these materials. Personalized learning and development, improved efficiency, the ability to enhance assessment, and also adaptability of materials to different formats. But limitations include inaccuracy, the fact that the responses are derivative of copyrighted works, and you can't really tell exactly what these things are derivative of unless they are cited. It replicates biases of the training data, but also of the input that is given by users, by you or by other users. There are also significant privacy concerns and general ethical concerns as well. So in order to understand really how we need to interact with these tools, there are 3 quotes or caveats, and you probably have heard iterations of these, but these 2 gentlemen were the first to introduce me to these concepts, and so I have their pictures up here. First was one that was told to me first by my advisor at ISU, Dr. John Curry. Do not use technology for technology's sake. In other words, we shouldn't be using a technology just because it's the new flashy thing out there. We should be actively and critically thinking, how is this going to affect what my patrons need to do, what I need to do? And is this actually going to give me the product and the outcome that I want? Secondly, and kind of related, technological success is not about the technology, but about the user. You need to have technological know-how. You need to be AI literate, information literate, and technology literate when you use these tools, so you can use them effectively and ethically, and also so you will be aware of when these tools are acting unethically, and you need to control that. You need to take responsibility for what you create or generate using these tools. And then thirdly, David Wiley first told me, your job will not be taken by AI, it will be taken by someone who knows how to use AI well. And I know that recently in the past week, there's been a lot of pushback on this idea. Specifically, a lot of people are saying, that there is no AI revolution, it's not as big as people think. And I would say that there is an AI revolution, but it is taking a form that most people aren't even considering. It's not going to be a massive thing. It's not going to, completely wipe out jobs, but it is going to significantly alter those jobs. And it's going to become more in a form of training and differences in responsibilities rather than complete wipeout of jobs, meaningful wipeout, meaning, yes, AI can produce text, and yes, it can spit out articles, but human collaboration with AI will produce much more meaningful materials. And so, yes, the job can be taken over by AI, but I still think that human input is much more, very, very important, even when people are using AI. And why is that important? Why do we need to have human moderation? Well, this is the Magdeburg unicorn. This is not an AI product. It was actually a discovery in the 17th century by monks in Germany, and it is a fossil of a woolly rhinoceros. This is one of the worst fossil reconstructions in human history. They took this and they said, oh, it looks like a unicorn, and they called it a unicorn, and they displayed it and told everyone it was, and now obviously we know that it is not. But this is just one example of what happens when you act and spread misinformation, especially without fact checking it first. A kind of humorous case in point. When I put this image in the PowerPoint, the AI-driven alt text generator stated that it was the skeleton of a dinosaur. And so this is kind of a meta example of how AI can get things wrong, because there's much more context that the AI missed that only I could know because I had done some research and I knew about this and I had the benefit of the text. It was only analyzing the image, not the accompanying text. So we need to make sure that we and our patrons are not creating the AI version of the Magdeburg unicorn, that we are helping them engage in critical thinking and information literacy skills, as well as tech literacy skills. So at this point, do you have any questions or comments you would like to have? Put them in the chat. Again, our questions that we are going to think through this whole conversation are: how does generative AI impact patron technology literacy? What is your perspective on patron uses of generative AI? What frustrates you the most? And what strategies do you use and are you thinking about using when teaching technology literacy? Any questions or comments so far? If not, we can continue to the next section. So what exactly what role do librarians play in technological advancements, especially when we're trying to educate patrons on best practices? Constructive use of technology is necessary for advancement in any field. If people, yes, the fingers, yeah, see? If people are not open to new methods and workflows, they will be left behind when selected technologies are implemented throughout their field. This may not be true in general life, but it is definitely true in the workplace. This may include using technologies in secondary uses to an extent. For example, using Wikipedia used to be banned from the classroom, but then educators encouraged students to use Wikipedia as a source reader. By looking at Wikipedia's sources, students can view some inspiration for their own materials, and they can also know what sources are not appropriate, because obviously Wikipedia sometimes uses incorrect sources. And so you can have analogous interactions with AI tools. If librarians encourage ethical and effective use of technology, patrons will not use the tools for inappropriate and effortless tasks, although this can be very fun. A brief comment on those fingers, and thank you for noticing that those fingers are awful. These were the best fingers that the tool could come up with. So, I mean, granted, I came up with this image probably a year and a half ago, but I mean, I don't think that it would be much better right now, even because I've been created other images. It is very interesting. So how can we guide patrons through this, and what framework can we use to do this? Well, I propose that we use the teacup model, and the teacup model of technology integration was created by Dr. John Curry, who was one of the people whose picture was on that slide before. It was created for education, but it also and instructional design in the current world is being used not only in education, but also in workforce training, in organizational training and management, etc. So when this says teacher and student, I would encourage you to think librarian and patron. So the idea is that a librarian or a teacher will consume materials or consume tools, and they will learn about best practices. They'll get to know how things should be used. And then they will produce those things and give them to their students. They'll produce things publicly, transparently, according to best practices, and they'll train their students and give these materials to their students. And then the students will consume those materials that their educator or the librarian has given them, and then they'll go and they'll find other materials and compare and contrast and see what other people are doing. And then they will produce their own materials, and hopefully they'll use those to spread that knowledge to others. And so before long, you have this chain, this linked chain of teachers and students and people who are spreading. And as long as these are being taught through best practices and with a sound technology literacy and information literacy and all of those things into the products that we're giving others, then theoretically, we will have a wide group of people who have been trained using a sound pedagogy of these technologies, not only for generative AI, but in fact, this model was created a month before ChatGPT was released, so before the generative AI craze. So just guiding principles for prompt engineering. This is a lot, and I recognize this. And this was kind of to show that there are a lot of different ways that you can use for text generators, that you can prompt them to generate things. You can have soft prompts, which means you just have like a sentence or a phrase of prompting. You can put data or knowledge that you have into it and ask it to integrate it into some format or other. If you want more structured prompts, I recommend the CoStar framework, which was created by GovTech Singapore, which was a government department in Singapore. It encourages the user to have context, the objective, the style, the tone, the audience, and the response in the headings. And so this can help the AI and really the patron. And I always say prompt engineering is more for you as the user than it is for the tool. It can help you think through what you want to have or what you want it to do before you prompt the tool. But whatever prompt style you use, remember to be as specific as possible in your prompts. Iterate your task to acknowledge efficiency and knowledge gaps. Provide contextual information and examples, and ask ChatGPT to justify or explain its decisions, or to refrain from doing so, because it will get annoying, and it is annoying, and sometimes you're like, just stop and give me what I asked for. If you want more examples, go to platform.openai.com/examples. And again, those are OpenAI tools, but there are other tools as well with those links. So the librarian as producer, I was able to create these two textbooks with ChatGPT and with Claude. I only used them to create use cases or to create summaries of data and information that I already had, but I was able to publish these textbooks and provide this information openly with Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial licenses. So let's practice. This is a massive QR code, and your phone might not like it, but this is a QR code to ChatGPT. But remember, whatever prompt style you use, be as specific as possible, iterate your tasks, provide context, and you can ask it to justify or refrain from justifying. So here's the QR code for ChatGPT. And then here is the links to all of these different tools. We have text tools, image tools, text-to-speech audio, music audio, video, and so you can use any of these, and here are the links. I'm sorry, I apologize for not having QR codes for all of these, but that would have been hard to handle visually, I imagine. And Jason, what time is it? How much time do you have?
It is 1:19.
1:19, okay, so, sorry?
I was just gonna say 26 minutes to go.
Okay, so we're gonna do that for 5 minutes, and feel free. I was going to have more of a stop and discuss these things that we're creating, but feel free to put it in the chat and to talk about it in the chat. I apologize for being a little longer and talking before, but I love chats. A lot of times I like the chat more than I like the session. So go and engage with each other in there. I hope that you have a lot of fun, and I'll obviously see what you guys have made in the chat. And I'll keep talking, and this is the patron is consumer. So there's a slight difference between the patron is consumer section and the patron is the librarian is consumer. When you are consuming things as a librarian or as an educator or as a teacher in this context, you want to think, how is this going to affect my patrons? How am I going to teach them? What things can I use to show them best practices? When you're a patron and consuming as a patron, you're examining and critiquing them for yourselves. And I apologize again, like I said, I combined these. A lot of these, I use ChatGPT here, but I had Claude, I had Perplexity here, I had a Grok, Llama. So this apparently is a ChatGPT centric presentation. I do apologize for that, but producing items suggested by Claude or producing items suggested by Perplexity, or analyzing the images created by Leonardo, or exploring the nuances in responses of other multiple AI tools to prompts about medicine, sociology, etc. So when I say ChatGPT, and I've learned this in the field, a lot of people, when they say ChatGPT or when you say AI, they conflate a lot of those. And so we can use ChatGPT really as a stand-in for a lot of different tools, especially as ChatGPT is multimodal now. Casey Coons has put in perchance.org. It has a ton of customized AI generators you can modify. It's locally stored and there's no account or pricing. That is amazing. So everyone go to perchance.org, go into that chat. I will definitely be using that in a few minutes. The patron is producer. Part of this is when a patron uses prompts to generate a well-crafted first draft essay or report on a topic. When you use prompts to generate appropriate and thorough codes or data for specific purposes, such as a computer code, or when you create items using ChatGPT and then perform the patron as consumer tasks, when you create items using Ideogram or Midjourney, and you analyze those and edit those. And yes, thank you, Meredith. This presentation is mostly on how to teach patrons, but I do have a separate presentation on kind of best practices or like a pedagogy for using it, and I probably should put that in here. Dr. Jeanette Law on LinkedIn has created, and I'll put this in the chat, a rhetorical prompting framework with Kennesaw State University. That is an excellent way to think through anything you're creating. And in my blog that I put, in my last blog post, actually last night, I talked about this. Her rhetorical prompting framework is, and I should have had this link. I'll put it in the chat if I can get away later and after I'm done sharing my screen. But it is excellent. It makes you think through, who is my audience? What is the context of, like, how is this thing going to be used? What really do I need to communicate to people? Do I need images? Do I need text? And when you go through all those things, it helps you create the best prompt, and it also helps you keep your interactions with the AI tool in context. You don't go off into the weeds. You have a goal. It directs you as to, this is what you're trying to do. Don't lose sight of that. So really interesting. Jeanette Beatrix Law is her name. She's on LinkedIn. She's on Facebook. Fantastic researcher, fantastic educator as well. Thank you. Yes. So any discussions on what we've talked about so far, or questions? Cynthia? You can put it in the chat, or you can talk, speak and unmute if you want. Jessica says, in teaching and trying to help our patrons be more comfortable with the tech, does anyone offer any particular guidance? Are there useful things to ask users to do with it? So I would encourage them, and I'll talk about this in a bit later, to be very private and very confidential with their data. But you don't want to obviously go at it from like a fear-mongering, be afraid of it. But I would, and so I would encourage them not to create things for themselves initially. Just ask it questions or ask it to generate a 3-paragraph essay on this topic, or ask it to navigate using Bing and to show the sources. And when you ask it to navigate using Bing at the top for ChatGPT and also in Bing or Gemini, you can see the sources it's using. So kind of show them how it works and show them what it does so they can understand exactly what they're working with. Because a lot of the miscommunications, I believe, are because people aren't understanding what they're working with.
Yeah, it looks like Cynthia has raised her hand.
Okay, yes. Cynthia, you can unmute and talk, or you can put it in the chat as well, or a Q&A, however you would like to ask your question or comment.
I went ahead and unmuted you, Cynthia, if you want to ask your question.
I apologize. I do not have a question. I think my computer just wanted to be noticed for some reason. I'm actually listening to you while I'm mitigating a flood in my basement, but I do not have any questions at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
That's happened to me before. Other computers are weird, and it can be weird too. So
great timing, right? Yeah.
Fantastic. So I will, my screen sharing was paused. Am I back to screen sharing?
Mark has a question.
Oh, okay.
The Q&A, I can read it to you.
Yeah.
Based on the ChatGPT, I am using the same exact prompt entered twice, gives different results. So why cite ChatGPT as a source if it is frequently not the same? Did I read that right, Mark?
So citing, and I will talk about this later. And you're good, Mark. Citing is more to show how that you use the tool rather than showing the information that you gain from it, and that is the purpose of citing. Really, it should be more of an acknowledgement, but we acknowledge things through citations, and I'm going to talk about that, and it might make some of you mad, but I'll explain my reasoning of why I cite the way I do. And why I suggest things. So we'll talk about citations later, but yes, it's more to show that you used the tool and how you used it. So how can we leverage AI in our daily work as librarians or as creators or producers? We have 2 more questions, it seems like. Oh, okay. So we have free and open workflows. That's what I love the word workflow. If you've ever listened to any other of my presentations, you probably have heard me say workflow until you hate the word. But you can create videos, you can create images with captions, you can create cover image, podcast episodes, documents, procedural guides for the public or for workers, or you can visualize and present data. So if you look at this podcast episode workflow that I created, and this is on my library's LibGuide, we have Claude here, ChatGPT, we have Microsoft Designer or Dolly, Adobe Express. I know that they recently came under fire for a lot of their stuff. I have another presentation on ethical issues and considerations. We can talk about that another time. There's music creators such as Udio or Effusion, and Canva and CapCut also have AI influence tools. And so there's a lot of different tools, and I would caution you against only using one specific tool for things. Experiment with these things and find out what things work best for your workflow, and then you can stick with things. But you should really learn best practices with a wide variety of tools so you can see how they're different, how they're similar, and how they operate, and what are their creators' motivations. That speaks a little bit to ethics and to kind of the social aspect of the tool. But I'm getting a little off track. But in any case, use workflows with multiple tools in mind. So the impact of these experiences, consuming and producing these tools, are that patrons can learn the subject of their course or the subject of something they're trying to learn, or they can learn how to create things and also how to effectively use technology at the same time. The strategies to use generative AI tools are analogous to using Boolean operators and keywords. And so I think it's appropriate that a librarian encourages the use of database practices and strategies, and a structured approach to utilize similar technologies. So now we get here into Mark's question: to cite your sources and your tools, acknowledge the tools that you use. There's no set standard for citing AI tools, and even the official suggestions by the APA and the MLA in Chicago are merely suggestions because of the constantly changing perceptions of the nature of generative AI. Even in the beginning, APA and MLA specifically said, we're just offering these as suggestions. These are not rules. These are just how we think you should cite. And then I think they took that caveat down, but they retained essentially the same citation format. But we should know the AI use and citation policy for the school, class, and or publication that you are writing for, or that your patron is doing, or if something is going out to the public, but it doesn't necessarily have, you know, a policy, you should at least encourage your patrons, and you should use accurate and thorough citations. The ideal citation format in any style should include the tool name and the version, the time and the date of usage, the prompt query or conversation title, and the name of the person who queried. Yes. Ways to save conversation records include the Wayback Machine, the AI archives, which are not recommended, or ChatGPT or Copilot, or now Gemini have chat links. And so you can actually now, I think GPT-4o now has links to image chats. And so include links to the chat, or yes, the prompt that you used, the conversation you used, to make sure that people are understanding what conversation you used to create this, what did the generative AI tool create, and what did you do after it? How does it differ from what you created? So here is an APA citation, kind of a derivative that I created. I have my name here, the last name with the first initial, and then the creator of the tool, the year, the chat title, that it was a conversation with whatever tool you used, the fact that it was a large language or an image model or an audio diffuser or whatever, the version information, the date that it was generated on, and a shareable link if possible, if at all possible. I would strongly encourage that. This should be as required as the other aspects. If you don't have a shareable link to the chat, I would include an appendix with a screenshot or a text transcript of your conversation that you had. And so, for example, I would put Hepler R and OpenAI 2023, Barogs might have wings, an online conversation with ChatGPT, which is a large language model, August 3rd version, generated on August 22nd, 2023, and then the link. And then here's the MLA analog. Now, this is kind of when I said people would get a little bit frustrated with me. I have my name in this citation, which means that I am saying that I was an active participant in this conversation and an active actor in this interaction, and I take responsibility for the output. Now, here's a caveat, and this is something that we all need to be to consider if you use this style of citation. If you are citing yourself as an author, you had better act like one. You had better edit things. You had better quality control things. You had better look at the sources that it's having and, you know, make this your own. Don't just copy and paste things, just use, and this is part of best practices, but citing this way, in my mind, is a way to kind of keep track of myself and say, hey, am I using this ethically? Am I making this my own? Am I actually putting in the effort to claim responsibility for this output? And so, yes, I have this on citation and I do cite myself, but I would like to say that I hold myself to a relatively high standard of actually putting in my own effort into the eventual product. A few caveats about copyright and AI, because we have to talk about it. We are librarians. Our understandings and actions regarding AI and copyright operate within the existing parameters of copyright law. It does not say, oh, in the future this is going to happen, or oh, in the future that is going to happen. It only operates according to existing copyright law and the existing copyright rulings. There are two major copyright rulings, the Zaria, or not rulings, excuse me, Copyright Office decisions, the Zaria decision and the Ellen Ray decision. Zaria, the Copyright Office said that a work could not be copyrighted because it was generated using AI. However, a few months ago in the Ellen Ray decision, Elisa Ray Shoup created a book and they initially revoked the copyright, but she appealed and they said, we're not giving you copyright for creating the work. we're giving you copyright for selecting, arranging, and presenting these snippets of AI-generated material. So she got copyright protection limited, a limited version, full copyright, but not for writing it, for arranging it and selecting it. So that is a new development. Current copyright law mandates human authorship for protection. Can we consider AI an author under existing copyright law? Can the programmer claim copyright over the works? It's our responsibility to stay informed and also to encourage our patrons and ourselves to prioritize respecting intellectual property rights when using AI-generated content. We should never put copyrighted content in prompts. Like I said, the ARL and ALA argue that training generative AI models on copyrighted works is fair use. And so you can use copyrighted works under fair use if you want to, but again, and I have to remind this, and this is a little bit out of the pale, but fair use is a allowance. It's an argument that is, or sorry, it's not an allowance. It is an argument that is acknowledged as valid or invalid by a court. It's not an allowance that you say, oh, this is fair use and it's okay. You have to be able to argue that effectively in front of a court. The court decides it, not the plaintiff or the. So you say that it is fair use to use copyrighted works in your prompts or your tools, you have to be able to defend that. OpenAI permits the use of its AI outputs as long as we don't misrepresent them as entirely human work. Claude does the same thing. Ideogram also does the same thing. And that is an image generator. Using AI-generated content, again, is not a workaround to avoid due diligence or to disregard others' intellectual property rights. When do you provide AI tools for people to use? You should never tell your patrons or your users that you've created a completely secure AI tool. This is very, very important. Do not tell your users, your patrons, that it is secure. Ensure that you and your users know your patrons the ethical implications of all the tools they're using. They need to have informed consent and informed use cases. When your patrons are using AI tools, be transparent and tell them about the data that is being collected and its purpose. Only Claude and ChatGPT explicitly deny extrapolating data and storing it, and their terms appear to support these claims, but again, you never know. Perplexity completely evades the question, and Google Bard not only supports that idea and Gemini, but it also tells the user how it extrapolates and stores the data. It tells you how to extrapolate this data. Ensure that you obtain explicit consent if you use patron data in tools, which personal opinion, you shouldn't. And then also limit data collection to what is essential through data minimization, anonymize data continuously. Here are some specific recommendations safeguarding privacy. Avoid explicit mention of private details. Avoid mentioning any generic factors of your life and implement and enforce strict access controls. Have people read over things. That's called having a human in the loop. That's having multiple humans in the loop. You as the user and other people who are checking your work. Never assume that opting out again will protect your privacy or the confidentiality of the data. And never put individual people's attributes into their prompts. If you're creating something for a patron, if you're creating something for a teacher to use on their students, if you're creating something for library programming, never put attributes into the prompts. For instance, if you are, and these tools can extrapolate this information as well. So if you put information and it can derive data from the information that you do put or extrapolate that, then it will. And so you need to be very, very careful about those things. Recommendations for confidentiality include ensuring that staff and contractors are sure as to what data they can input into their prompts if you're using contractors to make a tool or whatever. Enforcing a least privileged access model, which means that only the model that has the strongest data policies and the least access to your data is used. And finally, again, anonymize data that you put into your prompts. Specific recommendations for quality control include use each AI tool for its intended purposes and for nothing else. Engage in best practices such as the CoStar framework that we talked about. Know that the different parts of a prompt and ask the tool for sources or find the sources if it will not give it to you. Again, information literacy, verify the information that is being given to you. Find external resources that support the information Analyze the output for accessibility, DEI issues, and ethical concerns. Ensure that you are iterating each output multiple times and you're putting in your own work. And finally, review, fact check, and modify the output heavily, especially if it is a text product. As for reviewing the content and kind of quality checking that, I would encourage you to use the SIFT method. This SIFT method is an information literacy framework. It doesn't focus on kind of the ending of something or the currency of it or the connectivity with other resources or corroborating other resources. It focuses on the arguments and the claims, and it focuses on tracing those to the original context and investigating the source of data or arguments. So the four SIFT framework steps are stopped. They kind of take a deep breath back, and we can kind of look at it objectively. Don't look at it from the context of what you want to be true or what you were thinking is true. Look at it objectively. Investigate the source. Where does it come from? What associations does the author have? What has the author done? Are they qualified to talk about these things? Next, find better coverage. Find other resources that are covering the same information and the same topics and making similar claims, and investigate those sources as well. And finally, kind of more related to the third is the fourth. Trace claims, quote, and media to the original context. And you should be doing this with general information resources as well as ChatGPT and as well as other generative AI tools. And so that is why I kind of said the same processes and ideas that you use in teaching patrons about general technology literacy are similar to those that you're going to use for teaching people about generative AI and AI literacy. I like to say that AI literacy is 45% information literacy and 55% technology literacy, but those two things essentially combined are AI literacy. I also have a 14-step framework for AI literacy, but that's massive. But InfoLit, TechLit, combine those, you should be covered for most use cases, and you can simplify that for your patrons because they don't want to know about all of the different aspects. They don't want to be overburdened by all that information. They don't want to have information overload, but we can help them as long as we explain these things so they're clear but not overly complex. And I hope I haven't done that. So lastly, and kind of how we're going to bring this all together, how would you promote the ethical use of generative AI? What would you emphasize in patron training sessions from all this information? How can we ensure that the use of AI does not widen the digital divide? What framework do you want to use to promote AI literacy? And what limits would you impose on yourself, your staff, your patrons on using generative AI tools? And not obviously rules or regulations, but what guidelines would you have for them? So what I hope you can do, and you can discuss this, you don't have to do this obviously right now, but is you can create and share a model outline or objectives for programming or guidelines for patron interactions regarding generative AI tools. So how are you going to present this to your patrons? What skills will you encourage them to develop? So here are the materials that I like most. The Art of Prompt Engineering with ChatGPT by Nathan Hunter is an excellent resource. I have used it a lot. I recommend it a lot. It's only $10 on Kindle, and he's kept it at the same price continuously. He updates it regularly, but those updates do not mean that he has a whole new edition that he charges people for. It's consistently affordable for anyone on Kindle. He has an accessible version, very good book. And then of course, Ethan Wild's LinkedIn profile. If you're going to learn about AI, he's an excellent resource to learn from. I created those generative AI workflows. The podcast workflow is one in a series, and this QR code will lead to that. And then I also created documents on prompt engineering and open and free AI tools in multiple formats. Those slides that you saw with all those tools, it's kind of a document version of that. Here's some resources that I created. Again, this is a free resource created by Library 2.0 and myself with Hepler Consulting, but it is free. Library Robot. It has a database search query optimizer, a book finder, other resources like that. The AI and Libraries resource directory. This is a Slack group that I was a founding member of, and we kind of communicate and we have monthly meetings on how we're using AI and libraries. And then a custom GPT library science tutor that I use to help people with. It can help you with library of science with developing programming or procedures or analyzing kind of what best practices are in library of science. These are my references, and thank you very much. And now we can have our last round of questions if we have time. I think I might have went slightly over. I apologize.
We're right at time right now.
Okay.
Mark had posted several very provocative questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to take just a moment to address those. And of course, people, if you need to take off to get ready for the next session, you certainly can, but you can stick around as well.
So Mark, okay, does that mean that we can rearrange materials even if they're traditionally authored and still considered not a violation of copyright? That is true. It is a slippery slope. I would say that it would be a violation of copyright traditionally, but again, it's really, I would say, and this is again a very slippery slope, we have to wait for a Copyright Office ruling or decision or a Supreme Court ruling on whether in general it is a fair use. I would say it probably is all or nothing, or you better be very careful. And it does defeat the purpose of citing sources. But again, if I'm using something according to fair use, I would still cite it and I would still tell people where to look for the original. That's just me. Part of the purpose of citing is to go back to review source information. To show the extent to which AI is to be discouraged. So basically, if I understand what you're saying is using AI for research is to be discouraged because you want to preserve academic research rigor and best practices. And I would say yes. Notice that if you look at the library robot tool that I created or other presentations, I don't suggest looking for, asking it for information. I suggest asking it to help you find sites you can look at, or you put in data or research that you put in, and then it can summarize it for you, or ask it to help you develop queries. You should be doing the groundwork of the research. It should just be helping you, create good Boolean and keyword queries, or it could help you define topics that you can use to research, but you shouldn't be using it in your lit review, for example.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question, I hope.
Okay, great. Well, we are out of time. So let's thank Reed for his presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Yes, thank you very much.
And I'll stop the recording.